So we should all have had the agenda. I don't see any guests here tonight, but any changes to tonight's agenda? I did. I know Keith, you had just sent out the memorandum that was put together by the CCRPC, and I think that might be good to just chat a little bit about when we talk about the town plan goals. A little bit later today. I took a spin through it. There is a lot related to housing in here.
Yes,
Uh, so curious to hear, Virginia, if you or Keith, if you've taken any deeper look into that. So we'll get to that. Meeting minutes from January 25th when we met last. Any changes to the minutes? Are we good as they are written?
good.
We're good. Okay. Um, Perfect. So jumping right in, brainstorm review town plans. So something that we had talked about, coming out of last month's meeting was, what are those items that we want to, start thinking about putting into the town plan that are housing related, so that we can, uh, talk really the rest of the year about getting feedback from the community and socializing those items in the town plan that we want to include in the town plan. Um, Question for you, Keith and or Virginia. Last time the housing section was written, the housing committee was not in existence. Um, is there an expectation that the housing committee is owning the entire section on housing? Or is it going to be a joint development between us and the planning commission and your office, Keith? What is that? What is the expectation there? And have we talked about?
Well, I'll just say yes, and then I'll hand it off to Virginia.
Um, well, it's optional how we do it. I mean, we didn't have a housing committee. It was an orphan uh, technical plan last time around, so somebody else had to write it. What I would think would happen would be the housing committee could make comments about the narrative portion, the first 2 pages, and then indicate what new goals you wanted to add. I mean, you already added, Mark, in your review of the 2018 plan. You put down some goals that you thought could be jointly owned or could be owned by other people, such that looking at the community rating system from FEMA to see how that might work. I mean, that could be owned by somebody else. You could suggest, as you already have, that that's owned by somebody else. Who, I don't know. The I don't know if the planning commission really wants to own it or if anybody really wants to own it. I mean, it may be that it's owned by several different people in the implementation table at the back. In the section itself, it doesn't really say who owns those action items in the section itself. It just suggests that somebody thinks those are a good idea to have in there. So some of them we may just not want to change at all. Like maybe we still think it's a good idea that somebody work on the community rating system for flooding, for NFIP. We still don't know who's going to do that, but it sort of seems like it might be a good idea to have it in there. Maybe we could give it to the select board. I don't know. I don't know if the planning commission wants it, but so that's what I see happening. Maybe you just take the narrative section, you edit it a little bit if you want, or you like it the way it is, or you add a few comments to it. And then with the action items, this committee suggest action items that we think would be good to put in there. So there's no correct answer to your question. As Keith said, yes is the answer, because it will be a collaborative effort. The Planning Commission ultimately will be, or the steering committee, if and when we have a steering committee, there will be a body that's ultimately responsible for what goes into the final plan. But I imagine that what will happen is the steering committee or the Planning Commission will take all the recommendations that the different committees provide and, put them in there.
Okay, so I guess what I heard is input from the housing committee is wanted, obviously asked for, but let's say the final decision factor of what makes it in there is going to be determined by this yet to be determined steering committee, which comes out of the planning commission, or where does that get formed out of or come
Well,
out
we're
of?
still talking about that. Who's going to be on the steering committee? There probably will be some members of the public, maybe a select board member, maybe a couple of planning commission members. The tentative plan is to have some kind of a town plan 26 kickoff event and solicit people who would like to be involved in a steering committee. That's the kind of tentative idea. We haven't taken that step yet, but that seems to be what the Planning Commission would like to do. So, now that we have a housing committee, we're going to expect, if you like, or anticipate that the housing committee will have some good recommendations and they will just go into the plan.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at it now, and I'm looking at the particulars of it, and I see, instead of the housing committee, it says planning commission on the town plan, and there's 5 salient points that I think would be a focus, and then whatever the committee itself would want to add to that section. It's a pretty well written section, but it is dated, obviously, and I think that I wasn't here when the planning commission did this. But you guys have been in the trenches for a couple of years now on this, so you certainly could add a heck of a lot more to it. And I'm just looking at specifically the implementation and the technical plan aspect of it. Not a ton of stuff. Certainly can get our arms around that for sure. So.
And then kind of another clarifying question. We have talked about in some of our previous sessions around having maybe some tabling events or some other activities in probably the second half of the year, talking about the items in the town plan. Is that something that we as a housing committee should really do on our own, since we'll just be making recommendations about what to go into the town plan section? Should we really do that on our own, or wait for the larger, like, hey, steering committee is going to be setting an agenda for how they want to socialize the town plan in general, and we support that effort? I'm just trying to determine, like, how much do we need to do on our own versus play a supporting role to a larger town plan socialization with our community members.
Well, I would love to see the housing committee take an active role. And by the time we have this kickoff event, which we anticipate being in March sometime, we will have fleshed out a certain amount of outreach efforts. For instance, having a tabling event at the farmer's market maybe once a month for the 4 summer months.
For the town plan in general.
Right, but each, like one of those could feature housing committee members, and we're going to be talking about housing. So we would like to collaborate with you, for instance, on that. One of them would be natural resources. And so we would like to collaborate with the natural resources people on hosting a tabling event. We'll have a banner that says Town Plan 2026 to go on the, the tent or the table, and then maybe have a smaller sign that has the group that's going to be there this time. Hopefully, we'd like to have housing, natural resources, maybe transportation, utilities and facilities. We can figure out 4 sort of different avenues that could each have a tabling time.
Okay.
And then that would be one thing that you could collaborate on with the Planning Commission. Another thing would be to have a charrette that Keith and Regional Planning might arrange, which is a day-long or a 2-day-long kind of workshop or open house at the town center where there would be some maps. Maybe a housing committee member could be there at some point during that. We could have a list of when different groups are going to be there to talk about their particular slant on things. So that's another event that we've talked about. The kickoff event, hopefully we could have representation from different groups be at the kickoff event. So collaborative, but we don't really necessarily just want the housing committee to be a support group. We have really appreciated, this planning commission has appreciated the housing group supporting zoning efforts, but clearly zoning is not, housing is not all about zoning. Like that article that you sent, Mark, had some different ideas, or expanding water and sewer, for instance. That's something that's kind of outside of the planning commission. So this committee could make recommendations directly towards that. Like, we want to understand and work with the funding system because it seems to be a barrier. We want to go there, but we'll have to go after it if we want to do it. That's not a supporting role.
Yeah, and I just meant more supporting role for the socialization of the town plan that we've come up with, right? Like, I guess I was just trying to determine, is there a larger initiative, sounds like there is, that the town plan can plug in, or the housing committee can plug into, related to town plan activities, like
Well, kind of.
2026 town plan activity, like the planning of the town plan, let's say,
Right.
like that's what I mean. Not
Yep.
that execution of the town plan, once it's approved,
Right.
we couldn't play a bigger role. It's more about how getting to the path of approval, I
Yep.
guess.
But there's also plenty of scope for the housing committee to do social activities on their own. If you can think of something like you think, or this group thinks that what would be useful would be to, I don't know, have a tour of multifamily buildings, or, weatherized homes or something. I don't know. Whatever we come up with is going to be welcome.
Sure.
So, yeah, so it's a sum of each. Our own initiative and also collaborating with the steering committee when it's formed. It's a little amorphous, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? There's no
exactly. And
rule.
I'm just trying to get a little bit more, concrete as to like what our expectations are, what's expected of us in the town plan development activities,
Mhm.
that we're asked to do for 2026. And I think I have a good idea
Yeah.
of what's expected.
Yeah, and you've already started by sending in your reaction to the goals in the 2018 plan. That was the first step that we wanted people to participate in, so that's good. And then the next step is really going to be developing the housing goals that are now relevant and incorporating into the plan these new statutes like Act 47, Act 181, seeing how they should be, how they could be incorporated into the plan. So,
Um, Andrew, Connie, any other questions around just expectations around the town working towards the revised, updated 26 town plan.
You had titled this item Brainstorm Review of Town Plan Goals. Do we need
Yes.
more different? Do you want to review the current goals and just check them out again, or what's most helpful to you, Mark?
Yeah, I was gonna get to that next.
Oh,
So,
okay. Awesome. Thanks.
all right, cool. So what I had done quickly was well, as Virginia mentioned, right, what we talked about last time, we owed the Planning Commission an update on the 2018 town plan. So I shared that last week or last month. Um, and in there, really, I see that as a commentary on what was in 2018,
Mhm.
not necessarily what could be for 2026. Um, so I think focusing maybe tonight on what could be in 2026, what I had started to do, and I'll just share actually, let me share the link
Let me get
in the
your credentials in. There you go.
meeting here. Where is the chat? There's the chat button. Um, so all this content is content that we've already talked about, so it's nothing new. But what I had essentially done, and I'll share my screen as well, just so. Cool.
I do want to add something real quick, and I should have made this disclaimer early on. We've been Zoom bombed recently, and if that happens again, I'll be hitting the panic button, and then we'll just reconvene after that.
Okay, just use the same link to log back in.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So, what I had done was taken those items that were in 2018's town plan, which are labeled by the
Yep.
letter number convention here, and included any commentary that we had written for the planning commission update. And then down here, added in some new items and honestly really pulled this from our strategic plan, as I think both of these things are kind of going hand in hand here as we develop our strategic plan, in addition to our strategic recommendations, in addition to working on the town plan, right? I think they're kind of all happening in the same path. So what I
Mark,
thought, yes,
just and I'm sorry if I missed this, but could you put that link in the chat?
it should
Because
be in there. Wait, was anyone else able to get that?
oh, I'm sorry. Doesn't look like a link, but there it is. It's working. Great.
All
Keep
right. Yeah,
going. Thank you.
yeah, no problem. Um, so I had taken so what I thought we could do is take a first pass at least making some notes around, is the item related to that's related to housing something that we want to continue and push into the 2026 town plan? Is it something that we want to push but we need to rewrite or update? Or is it something that we want to kind of deprioritize and maybe doesn't fit into the town plan in 2018 or 2026? And I'll say 2018, 2026. And then look at, are there new items that we want to and or need to add, stemming from the memorandum from the CCRPC and or our own research, etc. Does that sound like a worthwhile exercise to go through tonight?
Sure.
Perfect.
Yeah, let's jump in.
So I make this a little bit bigger so we can kind of see more closely what we're talking about here. So, when updating zoning regulations, identify opportunities for development of a variety of housing types. For example, allowing mixed residential and commercial use, higher unit density, or unique accessory housing in certain identified districts. This sounds like maybe the shift of this might change a little bit based on the Home Act and kind of new targets, maybe to make this a little bit more specific. I know one of the CCRPC's pieces of feedback was to try not to use words that are support or encourage and to be more detail oriented. In our
Yeah, well, I mean, that's just their opinion. I mean, the town plan is an aspirational goal, an aspirational document. So in many cases, all we can really do is say we support or encourage. If we do have more very detailed things, then we need to plan to do those more very detailed things. I mean, like H11 looks to me like it's good. We want to keep on doing that, right? I mean, we've done a bunch of that, but we can it's an ongoing task to keep that in mind.
I will say I see the word commercial in there and residential as far as mixed use goes these days, and that certainly is not a priority anymore. So that's something to keep in tune with. Also, I would add, and I hope I'm not stealing anybody's thunder here, at the Planning Commission tomorrow, we do have CCRCP making a presentation on that very document that I submitted to this committee. And that's the second half of our discussion with them. The first half being about what's known as the future land use mapping and those items that go into that. Obviously, cordially invited last week, so just keep that in mind. I think a lot of your questions are going to be answered tomorrow, to be honest with you. You
okay.
know, but if we're out in front of it, that's fantastic. Get those juices flowing.
What time is the meeting tomorrow?
7 o'clock.
7. Okay.
Yeah, and to Virginia's point and everybody's point, Act 47 and Act 181, specifically 47, really started to, I mean, they put the thumbprint on us, obviously, with the mandates to increase housing up to a point where you could have 4 units on a fifth of an acre now, and it's just permitted at this point, which, quite frankly, we were pretty good with that here in the town to begin with.
And, what we need to do is we need to just put that in, we have to consider the remaining districts that are in the water and sewer service area, namely the commercial and the village commercial, and examine, this is the planning commission I'm talking about, examine whether they have residential uses that are allowed, and if they do, then we need to introduce that language into that document. But that language is already in state statute, so we have to administrate according to it anyway.
Right.
So,
Well,
and
to Virginia's, yeah. To your point, you can encourage people, private investment, certain development, but you're not going to be able to mandate it. That takes outside parties. So I think a lot of housing, I don't think Richmond sits on lump sums to build houses. So a lot of what I think our language would circulate around would be promotion, development, and encouragement of certain factors to encourage housing. Like we don't have a magic pill to create housing.
right. And, the the town plan is used to underpin certain activities and legal situations, but the zoning document is the one that actually has teeth to it. The town plan doesn't exactly have any teeth. They're just saying this is what we want, and this is what we want to encourage and promote. So I don't really have a problem with those words. I think it's overly ambitious to think that in a town plan you could not use those words.
Okay.
The thing about Act 47, and we may get to this if we get to the document that CCRPC sent, is there is a little mandate in there that talks about us having specific language to address how we are going to provide affordable housing. And that, I think, should be its own action item, and we will have to think about what we're going to say there. So, let's see.
Yeah, hey, I remember reading that.
Yeah, you have to have a specific blah blah blah. I'm looking for it. A specific goal that is stating how you are going to go about creating affordable housing. And it, as Andrew said, it's not something we can just say we have to have and we're going to make. But so we need a plan about it. What are we going to do? Are we going to do education to encourage it? Are we going to reach out to developers? Or, what exactly are the sub actions that are going to be included in that goal?
Here it is. Plans, page 6. Plans must include specific actions to address housing needs of low and moderate income households.
Right. So to me, that's a different goal from this one. That's just a different goal and set of actions, and we are going to have to generate what we consider to be what we could possibly do in the next 8 years to create that.
Ah, I see, Mark. I see where you're getting the eliminating zoning barriers.
Yes.
It's just closed that circle on my mind. Okay.
Yes, exactly. That link, there was a link in that CCRPC document that went to a 404 error, and
Still does.
maybe it's part of some of the cleanup efforts that are currently happening with federal documents.
Yeah, just eliminate them. It kind of gets rid of them. We do have the Enabling Better Places guide that we have been using right along to think about accessory dwelling units and, greater density that we have now been mandated by the state to achieve. And, that is a document that the Planning Commission has used quite extensively, Enabling Better Places.
I'm wondering if this information lockdown that's going on the federal level is responsible for this not being able to access it, to be honest with you.
That's
Yes,
my thought.
it absolutely is.
Man, that's across the board.
I wonder if the CCRPC has a copy of it. Maybe someone's downloaded it or something like that, and maybe they just have a copy of a PDF that they can share.
We can ask that tomorrow. We'll actually have them in-house, so not in-house, but
Yeah.
So,
Okay, great. Moving on to 1.2, continue to support the existence of the mobile home park and support additional affordable housing development in the park. I guess my initial take is like, why was this called out specifically versus thinking more in general about housing that might be more affordable?
Well, because this is the only goal that we have that is specifically addressed to affordable housing.
Should this maybe roll up into the that line specific actions to address housing needs of low and moderate income, maybe this is more of a sub action of that if we're gonna have a specific call out related to supporting housing needs.
Here's
I
something
think
odd.
something I'll add is I do think that's a very valuable piece of land, short and long term, both with or without water sewer expansion. So having a focus there, I don't think is ill-sighted. I think it's smart because there's nowhere else where you're going to find that type of opportunity to provide that number of housing units at a reasonable cost in our town. The
Yeah,
redevelopment of that would be awful if it became something that was above market rate type stuff.
yeah. So, I mean, Mark, I would be open to doing it either way if you want to put that as one of the things that is supporting affordable housing. I think it's good to call it out directly and maybe even have more specific actions associated with that. You know, like beginning a dialogue with the owner of the mobile home park, or developing a relationship with the owner of the mobile home park, or including the residents of the mobile home park in something or other, you know, some activity or something. So if we can think of things that might be more specific that we could actually do to support this, that might be a good idea.
Okay. I'm just trying to take notes over here of kind of what we're trying to,
Yeah,
what we're thinking about these.
I mean, since it is pretty much the one thing that we have that is directed towards specific actions to address the housing needs of low and moderate income people, you know, we can relate it to it somehow, either. Anyway, so.
Okay. So this one created town housing committee that can identify needs and partner with organizations to help secure funding, identify opportunities for construction or adaptation of housing stock, as well as aid in the creation of affordable housing policies that are welcomed by both developers and residents. Do we need something, maybe this is more change to continue to support the housing committee, or do we even need this item anymore, because we should now be able to expand upon what specifically we want to do in relation to funding, identifying opportunities, creation of affordable housing. Like, I think that is maybe what the whole town plan section for housing is going to be. So maybe we don't even need this piece anymore around the housing committee specifically. Does that make sense? Like, why do we need to talk about supporting a housing committee to do these things when the whole housing section of the town plan is going to talk about doing these things?
Well, what I would say, Mark, is that we certainly don't need a piece that says create a town housing committee. However, we could say something like continue to have an active housing committee that's working on housing. And the only reason I'm saying that is because I'm thinking of the economic development situation where there was an economic development committee and then there wasn't an economic development committee, you know. So maybe it's important to stress that this housing committee, now that it's formed, let's keep it going and let's keep its mission alive and, you know, help work on this important problem that we have currently in Vermont and those kinds of words, you know. So that would be my take on it. And the language that's in here about identifying needs and partnering with organizations to help secure funding and Identify opportunities for construction. I mean, those are all actions that, or sub goals, if you like, that we need to keep in mind, that these are things that we could do. Reword it a little bit for the modern situation.
So maybe it's more, we have our housing committee charge, maybe pull in some of those elements into this as to what we have, what we want to do.
Yeah, I mean, just stress that we need to keep this thing going if we're going to help solve the housing crisis problem. We can, you know, beef it up a little bit and own it. The housing committee can own it.
Okay. Encourage concentrated residential development in areas identified for growth.
I don't know, were areas ever identified for growth or? I mean, that's what the future land use mapping is supposed to be doing, but I'm not sure where we were on that in 2018.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've already done a lot because we've increased the density in all these village districts that we had to do. So, and what the Regional Planning Commission is going to want to call the residential areas of the village areas identified for growth. That's it. Those parts of town meet their criteria for areas identified for growth. That is what they're going to want to call them on their future land use map. So this one, I mean, I don't know whether we can just say continue to encourage concentrated residential development because we already have done a fair amount of that.
Well, I mean,
So you could put ongoing and just keep that one in there. I don't know.
In-
What do you think?
I guess is it implied in is there enough here to keep this on its own? Or is it implied in the other areas of what we want to include in the town plan that we could delete this section? Like maybe I don't know enough, but to me it doesn't really say a whole lot.
There's no ink budget. You can have as many of these as you want, by the way. I mean, let me see if it,
Sure.
do you think it is referenced enough in other areas or?
Well, I feel like in reading through some of the elements from the CCRPC, like there was a whole section, I forget where it is, about really concentrating on village centers and those areas that are, increasing density in your village centers, right? In those areas that we
Right.
already have. And is there something more we would want to add, maybe either add to this that helps expand on it?
My 2 cents would be to add the fact that really Richmond is pretty much built out in the areas of the water and sewer, and what you're dealing with at this point is infill development. And with a focus on making sure stormwater doesn't get any worse. That's one thing, but infill development, ADUs, accessory dwelling units, again, that's a specific to infill development. And additions to existing structures to create multifamily dwellings. That's really the only approaches that we're going to have in the town, with the exception of Jelena Court. Or if you raise what exists and then rebuild. And I mean, I think everybody here at the table understands that the town is pretty much built out, where you have lots of constraints, and infill development is what we're seeing from a zoning permitting point of view. Not a lot of new construction going on in the town.
which we may address in some other goal, perhaps. Anyway, but it might be important to, I sort of agree with Keith, your feeling that you might want to say, encourage concentrated residential development in areas identified for growth while mindful of stormwater considerations. Because I think that might be an important set of words to keep in the forefront of people's mind, that we do need to think about that while we're going gung-ho for concentrated residential development.
Does that
So-
include flooding? Does that include like the river flooding, or is that not considered stormwater considerations?
Yeah, I
well,
mean,
we don't-
ADU
Go ahead.
infill housing is not an efficient use of impervious surface for housing, though, from a concentrated development. Just my 2 cents. Like you can house 30 people under the same roof line, you house three under. That creates, without parking minimums, the same impervious surface.
Mhm.
So what are you suggesting?
And nothing, I would just, I'm commenting that if stormwater is part of the conversation, ADU housing is not a efficient use of that. It's just creating a too much lot coverage and poor use of that lot coverage to have just one ADU dwelling. It should be a 3 unit there, which is what the Home Act supports, which is 4 units or whatever Keith alluded to in a 20.2 acre lot. So they do conflict a little bit. That's my point. I don't have a resolution to it. But if stormwater is something that's going to pop up in other places, it's something to keep in mind to tie things together.
Yeah, I mean, that goes with any development that's going on in the town at this point in time, regardless if it's a multifamily or an ADU or a shed. Stormwater is an issue right now. So, I mean, the thought is that when you're doing infill development, regardless of what it is, stormwater needs to be considered, and it has not in the past.
And even though ADUs might be an inefficient use, it is something that people might want to do that might be better than nothing. So, I don't think we necessarily want to discourage the creation of
No.
ADUs, but
Not saying that in a perfect world, you take those old 1890 construction rundown multifamilies that are 4 units and you rebuild 3 lots together, like I've said many times, into 30 units. But the cost of construction and land acquisition is too high to make it happen. Long term, in 50 years, 40 years, that's going to be what you see a lot of villages trend towards, I would think.
Yeah, and they'll be going up also. That's the other thing. The 35-foot misnomer that because we don't have a ladder truck, we can't do it is bunk. I mean, it just is. You just have to follow the regulations that the fire marshals require of you and the state requires of you. So
And is that something that would go into a future land use map? Like, or
Zoning.
when we're talking about like making a development plan, right? Thinking about what this segment of town could look like is drawing in like, hey, we want to encourage the combining of properties for some larger
It's zoning. You have to, it's all zoning. That's all those things are. If you encourage the right zoning and have the right zoning, then eventually over time, the opportunity presents itself and somebody invests the time and money it takes to redevelop it. It's not a short-term fix.
it's definitely
Well-
predicated upon economics for sure.
And, my feeling is that this line, H14, could be in every plan for the next 5 times 8 years, and it will be different. It will have a slightly different meaning each time. You know what I mean? Like right now, encourage concentrated residential development may mean that some people put up ADUs and some people make duplexes out of single family homes. Our next plan, this same item, which should be in it, may mean that people are tearing down those duplexes and putting up 4 and 5 and 6 unit buildings, so I think that we don't necessarily have to be that specific unless there's exactly something that we want to see. Like if the housing committee wanted to agitate for allowing 4 stories, then that would be a very specific thing we could put into this plan. But I don't know that we want to do that. It might come back to haunt us, but anyway.
Is there something like encourage concentrated residential development in areas identified for growth through the development of a what's the right terminology? A master plan for X district, right? Like that's like a little bit more specific, and there's an action tied to it because we're creating a master plan or whatever that's called for that area,
Well, that's an
right?
ambitious goal. I mean, you will want to think about if the housing committee wants to do that. That's a pretty ambitious goal with
Well, we
lots of
got 8
steps.
years to do it, right? Like, and then we're thinking a little bit longer term. It's not like it needs to be done next year. Just like throwing that out, like what
Yeah.
is it that makes this more palatable, right? Like or more like definitive. I don't know.
Well, it's more specific. I mean, it has an actual product that you create, which is this plan. The way it's written right now, it's quite general and it could be applied to whatever stage we're in with this growth. So it depends. I mean, do we want to have a product that we wish to create, which is a master development plan? I don't know if we do or not. Or do we want to continue to have a statement like we have here, which is just general enough that you can fit into any opportunity that seems to be presenting itself? I don't know the answer to that question, but
Yeah,
others' opinion.
any other thoughts from others on how
I
specific we want to be?
I like I like attainable steps that I can be held accountable to. And I really liked what you had in your article or little blog post that you sent to us, Mark, which is like, be ready for the next loan development opportunity. Be ready to write letters of support. That kind of incremental, here's an opportunity coming. How do we get ready to support that one and then the next one after it? We've had at least one of those go by, not through anybody's fault that it just didn't work out that way, but we could be better prepared to do that incremental support to help developers do what they need to do.
And I have a piece that's a little bit further down that I think is around that element as well. I mean, I guess for me, and maybe including master development plan isn't the right answer, but being able to come back and say when we have to do a report out again on, hey, how did we do on our 2026 master plan, like or a town plan? Hey, this was a thing that was identified and yes, we did it or no, we didn't, right? Like that we could rally around being a little bit more specific.
Right. Well, I mean, you could come back on this one. I don't know if you did. I don't remember that from your note that you sent out, which said, okay, well, we supported multifamily housing and increased density in the areas. So that's encouraging concentrated residential development because you're supporting zoning, which is designed to achieve that. So, it is a concrete thing that was done that fulfilled this action item. So I'd be okay with that.
Well, we put a question mark in here and we can kind of move on. The other items, this is FLU, which was future land use, invest in municipal infrastructure improvements that will allow for new development. So this is, I think, squarely within like the water sewer kind of recommendations that we have, and or uh yeah, water sewer, or like extension of sidewalks and things like that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, I mean, I think once again, it depends how bold the housing committee wants to be. I mean, if you want us have as an action to investigate the expansion of the water and sewer system, I mean, that's not even like specific enough to say, cause the water and sewer department to expand, but to investigate it, which we haven't really fully done, because we haven't talked to the water and sewer people. We haven't talked to the select board about this. We haven't plotted out where the expansion would be if there was going to be a useful expansion. I don't know. Maybe we have explored that fully. Andrew, what do you think? Have we given up on that, expanding it, or it does seem like it's still important to think about that?
Yeah, I mean, like I commented the other day, I think not just expansion, but just investment in infrastructure, as this alludes to from a future storm perspective, what's going to happen to that land and how long will that infrastructure last in its current setting? From what I've heard and read, it seems like it's going to need investment in the short term, medium term, and long term. So if there's going to have to be investment in the infrastructure around just what's already operating, the location of that infrastructure and the thought process behind it would be smart to be included in a town plan, mapping out, okay, if we move this substation here, that can help service this geographic area.
So do we
That's
want,
more logical. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
so I was just going to say, do we want something like to be included in any discussions that revolve around municipal infrastructure improvements, like, be to participate in discussions with the water and sewer department and the select board and the town administration, because I think probably right now the housing committee is not really included in those discussions. The committees here in Richmond are kind of siloed, so everybody sort of does their own thing, but maybe it's important that we say there's some kind of connectivity between, the water and sewer plan for the future. What's the future planning there, and the stormwater planning, and, is there a future plan? We need to be involved in those discussions. And maybe we need to promote a longer term plan. I don't even know if there is a long term plan. Keith, I don't know if you know that, whether there's a long term plan like that.
Not that's been promulgated that I know of. You,
So anyway, so that would be my suggestion for this goal, is to be involved in discussions related to the future of, and if we want to talk about particular municipal infrastructure, such as the water and sewer system and stormwater system, to be involved with the water and sewer department and the town select board and administration in possibly developing a long-term plan that, considers the fact that concentrated housing in growth areas now needs to be developed. So where's this plan? Should we be promoting it? We should be involved for sure.
Okay. Who's in charge of writing the future land use items?
It'll probably be the planning commission, I would think, for future land use.
Okay. Okay. So we're still kind of connected from that standpoint.
Yeah. I mean, future land use does right now a big emphasis on housing from the regional planning commission in the state, but natural resources people also have a lot of input into that. So the housing committee could certainly input into that section.
Creating policies for encouraging affordable housing development. I'm wondering if this can be collapsed into what we had already talked about that's coming, specific session to address the housing needs of low and moderate income households. Maybe we can collapse this into that.
Or this one might need to just reflect that exact language out of the statute that,
Okay.
and then I don't know about creating policies exactly. We'd have to, it would be nice if we had a little clearer idea of what that looked like, creating policies.
Would we want to move this into the housing section versus the future land use? I don't know where that difference lies.
Well, it probably belongs to the housing committee, the planning commission, and the select board. I mean, all of those people, and the water and sewer commission. There are a lot of people who would be involved in creating policies. So that one, maybe we could rework to more reflect the language of the Home Act. I mean, the things that they suggest, that regional planning suggests in this letter, connecting residents to housing support programs and funding. Well, that could be something that the housing committee could do. Supporting options for multimodal transportation. Well, that's probably not something that the housing committee has any ability to do anything about. Pursuing or implementing grants for the creation of affordable housing through the Department of Housing and Community Development. That could be something that we could do if we thought that we wanted to do that, if we wanted to take that on as something to do. Those booklets, pamphlets that we can't find and maybe have been gotten rid of, those are kind of zoning things.
Okay.
Whether there are going to be any federal programs anymore for this is debatable.
Anytime soon.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, no, we're on our own, let's face it.
Okay. So we'll look at merging this or refactoring this to be made more in line with the Home Act, CCRPC recommendations, that piece. Develop a downtown master plan that would direct growth to the village area and address streetscape improvements identified in existing plans. Pursue strategy to attract and focus commercial activity in Jonesville. Is this
What does
really?
ED stand for?
Economic development.
Thank you. I figured it was something economic, but I was like, appreciate that.
Yeah, any commercial activity in Jonesville is in a floodway. It's really hard to attract and focus commercial activity in Jonesville. I'm not sure I understand that statement.
Yeah, I mean, this might be one that we want to get rid of altogether. Uh, The idea about a downtown master plan has kind of been floated around for a long time, and it's like the first one that we talked about, which was some kind of a master plan, a master development plan, which is hard to do, and I don't know, we haven't been very successful in being able to do that kind of thing. It's very difficult to get everybody on the same page about what you want to do. It's like, having a sidewalk plan. You make a sidewalk plan, and this is where we want the sidewalks, and then all of a sudden people don't want sidewalks there, and so kind of what's the point? Jonesville, we don't really know what we're going to do with in terms of planning for Jonesville. We need to have a focus group somehow out in Jonesville. What do they want? Do they want to just be a residential area? Route 2 is in the floodplain. There's a whole bunch of houses up in the hills. So I could see getting rid of this altogether, but I'm open to suggestions.
Definitely is an area of town that needs an identity. And I've only been here for 4 years, and I've, 1 year I was gone, but I always look at Jonesville and I'm like, there seems to be potential there. Is there potential there? I'm just not sure. It's in a floodplain. It's different. It just doesn't have an identity. And correct me if I'm wrong. I'm on the outside looking in. Um,
Well, I think it kind of used to be thought of as a hamlet, when the kind of hamlets that you have in New York, these little hamlets, and the
Borough.
gas station or
Hayes
something.
Corner was kind of like that. It was a hamlet. There were businesses and houses there. It was within walking distance of a certain amount of people, and there were little businesses and stuff. That's kind of gone away, and they may just want to be a neighborhood. I don't know. I think we'd have to talk to the people who live there, I guess, and
Well,
I'm up for taking out a town plan, again, too
you know,
much in the town plan, there's like nothing gets done, right? If there's too much, there's nothing gets done. So I'm trying to think about where we
yeah.
want to also focus our energies.
So one of the housing committee's recommendation could be to either figure out what the heck this means or take it out. But I'm not particularly in favor of the language develop a downtown master plan. I don't know if other people want to go there, but I just haven't seen us have a lot of success with master plans. So,
So last one, support efforts to increase the supply of affordable housing in Richmond. Again, this is, I think, is similar to create policies that encourage affordable housing development. Like,
yeah, I
maybe
think
have-
those should be merged, definitely. You don't need both of those. They both say exactly the same thing.
All right. So I'm glad we went through that. I kind of copied the items that I'd written in the strategic plan. Before we go in there, is there anything else that is new that we haven't really talked about that we want to at least get down on paper here and think about?
And
there's nothing specific, then I can go into some of these items here.
we've circled the wagon.
Okay. So Connie, what you had mentioned earlier around like supporting supporting efforts that might come opportunities that might come our way, right? So I had in that strategic housing document something around like writing letters of support or for projects that are requested, or maybe we just make this a little bit more general and we talk about supporting reviewing and supporting development projects that might be an opportunity, and having a clear path um, to show the town's support for those opportunities. Right? I don't know if that's
So, I mean, I think that is a good idea. I think that one of the problems is we don't often know about the opportunities. Maybe we should request more input from the DRB or I don't know if this is possible, or the zoning administrator, if there are projects that we might be able to support that are around, that have been applied for. I don't know how the very active group in Heinsberg gets their information. We don't have anybody who's really a pipeline to that kind of information. Maybe the planning and zoning department should know and give the housing committee a heads up that something is coming up, or
Well, Virginia, when there was that loan program that the
rental revolving loan program.
yeah, rental revolving loan, it was we need something, and who would sign it? Who would write it? Who would, I mean, whatever that it is, there needs to be a process for turning it around in a timely fashion, maybe not 3 days over a holiday weekend, which was not reasonable, but there is still the possibility of trying to identify what are the pieces that we need to have together, and then let's just do a tabletop exercise where we say, what would it take to put that together? And we organize it so that we're more prepared and not just looking like deer in the headlights. What, that, which is the feeling I had.
Yeah.
That it just would be nice to write it down and be able to point to it and say, see, we all agreed that this is how it would work, so let's make it work. And then people would be able to say, oh, this is going to take about 2 weeks to turn around. So, or whatever a reasonable amount of time is to get people together to say yes and sign something. I think that's a potentially really helpful thing to do if, in fact, there, you know, the comment, we're on our own now, is like, yeah, and there's a lot of people who are going to try to make sure that, we're going to be just fine, or as fine as we can make it. So what are the things that we need to do to help make that happen?
Well, so looking at that situation, there was so much about that situation that was completely ad hoc and not done according to any kind of program or process. I mean, it was only a random conversation that people had at a meeting that, with the developer who might be able to utilize. I mean, so all of that would have to happen before we even had a process for writing a letter of support. We'd have to know about the programs. What are the programs? Do we know what all these programs are that might be helpful? Secondly, we'd have to know that a developer was looking at a program and it didn't kind of go in the back door to some random conversation that a select board member and a planning commissioner had with a developer. So I'm just trying to see how, Connie, your thoughts could be flushed out, but going back even further before having a process for writing the letter of support, who's going to do it, et cetera, is finding out about a situation that might need a program that we would have to find out about. You know what I mean? It's
So,
whole thing happened so completely outside any kind
right.
of,
It wasn't going to happen. That isn't like, I'm not regretful. It's just like, oh, look, that's a kind of thing that we should try to say, how do we make that happen better? And you're right, it isn't just about writing a letter of support. It's about understanding, like someone says, oh, there's this thing to apply for. And it's like, so who's sponsoring that? What are the assurances or whatever it is that you need to make money, get transacted. I think I think we can learn about it, ask about it, have people come to us and tell us about it. And we won't know every single program that's out there or will be out there in the future, but we should have some kind of process that helps people move through. Here's an opportunity. What do we need to know about it? What kind of support does it need? What kind of documentation does it need? Uh, who approves it? Who signs it? Who sends it off? And then who follows up, like what happened and what's the obligation or the accountability afterwards. So it's more than a letter of support, totally right. I'm kind of inventing what a set of steps might be, but I think it's worth our time figuring out how do we take opportunities. Somebody says, there's this great idea over here, and it's like, okay, let's try to get ahead of those and say when there's a great idea, who needs to look at it? And we start with an example, and it won't be perfect the first 5 years, but we'll work at it.
yeah,
So
well,
I
I
think
mean,
it's
I totally agree with that, but what I would like to say is how are we going to find out about those opportunities? People do not come to the housing committee and say, there's this opportunity. I mean, somehow the housing committee has to be put in the knowledge pipeline of somebody who might be able to need something. You know what I mean? So I think that's a whole other piece to this is how are we going to find out about these things? People don't think of the housing committee as somebody
Of
that
course
they
not.
want to
But
tell. So
but
that's where we
there's
need to start with. We need to start there, I think.
well, I would think we first have to start out by learning what kinds of projects have been out there in the past and what can we learn about them. I don't think we have enough answers to be able to say, oh, so and so should ring our bell when this happens. We need to know more about how does it usually happen? How does this process work? It's a
so
little bit of
yeah,
research and
so
learning.
I think for the town plans perspective, something along these lines, like building a system for supporting residential development projects that are proposed within the community, develop a pipeline of upcoming projects from DRB planning, zoning, developers, et cetera, and create the mechanisms needed to review, approve, and show the town's backing of projects. So I don't know if we need to solution this now, but as a item to put in our town plan, we talked about creating that mechanism or that process or system. And we got 8 years to figure it out, right? I mean, it's not like we need to figure it out next week.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. And, maybe somewhere in there you could raise the profile of the housing committee as someone who should be in the pipeline of knowing about these projects and also knowing about possible ways, this is good. And the mechanisms for review is fine. But we need,
Yeah, I mean, the thing about creating mechanisms is there may already be mechanisms. It's just a question of how do you line them up so that they can respond in a timely way to an opportunity where someone is saying, I've got this grant, this loan, this, whatever. And having maybe the mechanisms that we already have in place being useful to move this forward when they are organized to do so.
it's related a little bit to the desire that some of us have had for a while to have a fund that could respond in a timely fashion to land purchases that come up. And maybe that's on your list somewhere here, Mark.
It's next.
Developing
Good
the housing
segue.
fund, because, there are things that come up and the town is so sluggish in its ability to take opportunities, and maybe we're not ready for that. Maybe the town is just not quite ready to be able to do that. I don't know, but there have been a few land opportunities over the years that would have been great for us to take advantage of if we were really serious about it. But whether we have the capability to do that or not, I'm not sure. Anyway, this is a little bit like that, but this is a little easier because we don't have to buy anything. We don't have to spend money that we can't get our hands on in a nimble fashion, but we do have to know a lot of information in order to make it possible for us to do this. So anyway, it's good what you got, Mark. It's fine.
Yeah. So I put this about the housing trust fund, right, in here as well. And then the other ones, maybe again, these are like more specific, but talking about master plans for the gateway. Again, maybe these are more for the strategy document as to like how do we put some of these overarching things into practice. Um,
I'm still at the one piece at a time. Master plans are so oppressively, they just sound like, oh, you're going to figure everything out in a plan, and you don't. You do know you need water sewage to get out, do anything in the gateway. You know that. Um, and and that takes, there was one effort and it failed, and time will go by, and people will continue to need housing and better systems, and what everything Andrew was just saying a little while ago. Um, and so I'm I'm not excited as much, just as before, about developing a master plan, a town plan, a development plan, in addition to all the planning that's been going to be documented that the town has to agree on. But I think looking at what does it take to support that future development of infrastructure and everything else that's in that list, and what else could we actually do? Because a plan, it's a document and it guides people, but what is it that we're missing that we're not able to help make happen that we could do that would make things different? And I mean, I'm not opposed to planning. I'm a planner. I help people do strategic planning and all kinds of stuff, but I am I'm not as excited about diving into a master plan for the gateway as do we need to develop a relationship with the owner of the mobile park and find out what the residents are interested in doing and what the long-term growth plan is and how can we help? It's to me, the more focused you make it and the more specific the actions, the more you can say, yeah, I know, let's get folks together and talk about this in the community in different ways. And let's, have different, social opportunities for people to connect on this. And how can we raise this awareness? And let's have some stories and and then let's get together and go to the water sewer board and blah, blah, blah. You could imagine a campaign, but campaigns have to be around specific things that are going to be practically useful. And they don't, and you get a little diluted in your effort when you're trying to do a master plan because it just sounds like you're trying to paint the earth. It's just there's too much of that to do. That said, and I know that there are town planners, and there's one listening to this conversation right now where you can make effective plans, but I'm much more interested in for the next 8 years, what are the things that we want to pull down and work on, and get fairly specific. Brandy's document was great, But to me, we still need to drill down even deeper than what Brandy did and pick out the things we really want to work on.
So in the future land use section, there is a little description of each area in the village. I don't know if you all have looked at that, and the gateway is just described in general terms: moderately dense commercial, residential, and mixed uses, future uses. It's the attractive entrance to the historic village. It functions a little bit like, what is our vision for this area? And it's allows, I think, for less specific things to happen, because we don't really know what's going to happen out there, and because the water and sewer plan was so difficult, the planning around water and sewer. And by the way, speaking about the gateway, Mark, did you get my comment about the fact that the expansion of the water and sewer district is different from the extension of the lines?
Yes, the expansion was approved and the extension needs funding.
Right. The expansion of the district is to allow for you to extend your lines out there. And
Yeah.
everybody was fine with expanding the district, but they didn't want to pay for the lines actually to be extended out there. So we just need to be clear when we use that language.
Yeah, I can update that language.
So,
in
yeah.
the document. Okay.
Anyway, so I
The
would
only-
personally take this out, this paragraph, but
The only thing that I remember in talking with Taylor at CCRPC was that with one, there's some there could be some funding available to develop master plans. And then two, I believe with master plans, there is also the availability of additional funding to be allocated to accomplish those master plans, meaning they might be less willing to give the town funding to do certain things in this area until a master plan is drawn up. So there could be some more tangible benefits to accomplishing the goals that we want to have accomplished if that planning has taken place.
Just a heads up, Mark, I have to leave in 5
Yes.
minutes.
Yes. So we have not gotten through the rest of our agenda. I had a couple more items.
yep. One
maybe-
thing I would say about the neighborhood development is we're not doing that, so you can take that out.
Okay. Is there a reason
Yeah.
why?
Not going to
Yeah.
exist anymore.
Was that
It's going the way of the dodo.
are they that's not and they're just not
That's what the
Oh,
future
okay.
land use mapping and the tiers that they're developing are going to replace it.
okay. Got it.
Yeah, and we're still going to get the same benefits, except for a few months in there. Well, the same benefits will be available by the way they're going to map us anyway on their future land use plan without even going through this NDA business. So they've gone completely full circle on that and said, well, we thought we'd encourage you to do it, but in fact, we're now encouraging you not to do it because it's irrelevant.
So let me we'll share out this document and say if there's anything else that we want to add to this between now and our next meeting, let's do that. We did not get to where's my agenda here?
You review the strategic housing plan.
Yeah, strategic housing plan. I'll just say real quickly there. I made some updates to the water sewer section, and I did float those by Andrew in Virginia and got some comments. Hence was that earlier comment. So I feel like we're close on water sewer. We're close on the section that I had put together, and then I think the other two sections, I know kind of there's a lot of great comments you had put into the community development piece. And I'd like to just take another look at that and maybe turn that into a little bit more of a narrative. And same with the last section of our document. So I'll try and take a look at the
Go
communication
right ahead. Go
section
right ahead, Mark. I
next
did have a
time.
good conversation with members of the Richmond Racial Equity Group. And we can talk about that more later because they were thinking about an event that would work in their calendars and would be helpful. This was about that film that we watched separately, or some of us were able to watch.
Okay.
And they had feedback and suggestions on that. We could talk about that at a future meeting. Doesn't have to be tonight.
And maybe they're another group that we should say we should be in closer contact with. You know, like for the getting to know what projects are being developed. Do we need to know the planning activities? Maybe we need to be in better contact with some of these other groups who have similar interests rather than just all working in our own corner. Maybe that would be a good goal for the housing committee, is to maintain contact with da 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 and so and so.
Well, I felt like we made good progress on the town plan items. Continue to brainstorm those items. I think next month, um, revisit any new town plan items, review the strategic housing plan again. And we didn't get to talk about community outreach tonight. Is there anything pressing from you, Connie? Or
No, that's what I was just saying is that can wait.
okay, then we
So
can
we
move
have
this.
town plan, strategic housing plan, and community outreach, right? And our next meeting is Wednesday, March 26th at 5:30. Can everybody make that?
I think I might not be able to make that.
Play it by,
Yes, I'll be traveling, but so I may not be able to make it.
Andrew and Mark, if you're able to make it, we'll still have a quorum,
Yeah,
What date was that?
March 26th.
yeah, I don't think I have any conflicts then.
Yeah, that works for me.
Okay, then let's keep it. And Virginia, you'll have the recording and whatever works in my notes. But it'll be a more boring meeting without you, that's for sure. So,
Well, I'll
but
be on the Amtrak train. Maybe I'll be able to zoom in from there.
you can't talk probably, but you could listen and chat.
yeah, if you're in business class, you should be fine. Do it all the time.
There you go. All right. I think, are we good?
I gotta go too.
I think so.
All right.
Yeah.
Bye,
Thanks,
everybody, and good night.
Appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Good night.
Hi. Keith, are you going to the select board?
Yes, I sent you that email response to you, so you're
Oh,
good to go.
okay. Great. Thank you.
Good night. We'll see you later.
Bye-bye.